Learn to be super successful. Subscribe to my channel, Meathead. In the early 90s, from 93 to 2003, 4, 5, the demographics for myself were between 28 and 55. The demographics now is 15 to 35. So more kids follow me now than used to, i.e. we have 13, 14, 15-year-olds that have been very successful. And most successful in recent years is the one that he's not 15 anymore, he's now 18. He wants to make sure that everybody knows that, is a kid from Atlanta, Georgia, who did a $53 million television media deal when he was 15 years old. He celebrated his 15th birthday with the closing of the deal. So that means he worked on it when he was 14. He was a 9th grader in high school. How's that possible? 9th grader. He's now a senior in high school. The first people that I talked to yesterday on the one-on-ones, which all of you will have with me, just as when I look at you, I see at best apprehension in your eyes, at worst fear. At best apprehension, and at worst fear. And there's nothing to be afraid of. One of the reasons we have the boxing, which is tomorrow, I think. Well, yeah. And I didn't really understand this, and you've heard me rant and rave about it on YouTube for years. I can't imagine growing up, no matter where you grew up, except if you grew up like Barron Trump, which we're going to talk about. I doubt Barron Trump has ever been in a fist fight. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure. He may have taken boxing lessons, which I don't think he has. I can't imagine going through grammar school, junior high school, and high school, or the equivalent thereof, without somebody, either you hitting somebody or somebody hitting you. Yet, about 50%, I stopped counting at 50% because it made me so ill. About 50% of the kids in recent years haven't been in a physical altercation in high school, in school at all. About 50% of the kids, remember I call you all kids either because I'm old enough to be your father or grandfather. There's a couple of exceptions in this room that I'm not old enough to be their father or grandfather. But other than you guys, that you've never been yelled at. I can't imagine a 8, 10, 12-year-old boy or girl that's never been yelled at by his parents. The links don't connect. The synapses don't connect. Either the kid was a perfect child, which I'm informed there are perfect children. I've never met one, but a perfect child, or the parents were weak cunts, or a combination thereof. But yet, I've never had a couple or a guy or a gal in here that is involved in I love the word committed relationship, which I'll talk about later, some sort of relationship that hasn't had an argument with their significant other. I've never had anybody in the seminar. So what happens from not getting in fights in school, not being yelled at by your parents, and yet when you hook up, as they say, all of a sudden you get involved in arguments? There is a quantum leap there. And when you're going to ask me, when we start role-playing, you're going to ask me a number of questions, one of which is, how soon can I call him back, Mr. Peña, after they already said no to you? Okay, that's one question. Second question is, how aggressive is aggressive? And I'm going to answer that question now. Just think back to the last argument you had with your significant other. You probably raised your voice, didn't you? That's how aggressive. Just as I said last night, this is not a networking model. This isn't, how to win friends and influence people like the Carnegie course, which is a very good course. And I recommend the sales course still today. I took it. There's 3 things that Mr. Buffett and I have in common. Number one, we're both graduates of the New York Institute of Finance. Number two, we both took the Dale Carnegie course in sales because Mr. Buffett, his sales skills still aren't too great, but when he started in the 60s, he took the sales course in the 60s, I took it in the 70s, not because I couldn't sell, but because I was building a sales team and I wanted to see what the modern vernacular was at that time. Bless you. And the third thing that we both have in common is that we, although our model doesn't say buy and hold forever, this is closer to the buy and hold forever model because we're not flipping. Although you're going to hear a guy you heard last night, Ravi, who is a flipper. He had exited 26 out of 27, if I remember correctly. And so you can use our model. But getting back to, are we a kinder, gentler human race now? Are we and woke and political correctness is about, I guess, being nice to all people, nicer. But this morning I heard on the news, and I'm not a rumor monger, but I can't help myself. I'm not like the nymphomaniac that can't keep her legs together. I just heard on the news. Now, it came from Tucker Carlson, so you can either add credibility or reduce the credibility. Last night on his show, apparently, he had a former lover of the former President Obama on the show. Now, I only listened to it about 90 seconds, so I didn't listen to the whole interview. But unless I'm getting deaf or senile or I have dementia, he said he had a guy about 60-ish, had sex with Obama, smoked crack, and back when Obama apparently first ran for office, he went to the ABC, CBS, and NBCs of this world, the major news agencies in America, and nobody wanted to hear it. So there are no secrets in life, there are only mysteries. So I'll be interested to see what the follow-up, if there's any follow-up from CNN. And you could tell Tucker Carlson looked like he couldn't keep it from smiling. I mean, he had a shit-eating grin like you wouldn't believe of happiness that apparently he's breaking the story. So anyway, last night you saw Ravi. You saw the backward bicycle. And I believe you saw Barron. The way that Barron Trump was raised was very similar to the way our kids were raised. Except our kids got punched in the face and they went to proper schools. Apparently, the youngest Trump child was homeschooled a lot by his mom. But when you're raised like that, to say that he had a silver spoon in his mouth or a platinum spoon in his mouth, it's hard to relate to. I certainly can't relate to it other than that our children were raised pretty much like that. Our kids had governesses, plural, nannies, plural, in-house child psychologists. We only had one. We didn't have plural of those. We endeavored to do everything that was cutting edge, which in hindsight, being 2020, was wrong. And yet our kids, got in fights, et cetera, not just with themselves, but with other people. And our nannies and governesses were allowed to hit the kids. I doubt if Barron had a nanny or a governess, which he probably did, I doubt if they were allowed to hit the kid. Because I was raised, spare the rod, spoil the child. And that is so old-fashioned now, it's archaic, it's prehistoric. I'm considered Neanderthal. And my retort to that, as one of my students or one of my mentees pointed out many, many years ago, Neanderthal's brain was 20 to 25% bigger than Homo sapien. And my brain is oversized. But how Barron Trump, as anybody, I'm not going to embarrass anybody in this room, because we had at least one kid in here right now, the current group, that came from a well-to-do family and had, what would be considered a proper education for a rich kid. But But that's the difference, and that's how Trump was raised. Not as exaggerated as Barron, but that's how the former president was raised. Because he had a, if not a silver spoon, maybe a lead spoon in his mouth all his life. Then you saw the backward bicycle, which is one of my favorites. We used to have that bike here for years. And you guys tried to ride it forever. And then finally it became such a distraction, I got rid of it. Not one kid from 1995 to 2000 and, you being the kids, 8 or 9, was able to ride it. Myself included. And then we had the number 3 person, it was a woman, from Lindt, the Swiss chocolate maker, was picked up by her husband and her son to take her away from the seminar, and their 7-year-old kid got on the bike and rode it immediately. That's the only person I've ever seen with these eyes ride that bike. Because this seminar, we have to rewire you. It would be easier if you were robots, and that's why we call you QLA bots, and I could rip the wiring out of you and replace it. Because virtually almost everything you've learned is wrong to create generational wealth. And just as almost everything you've learned about sales is wrong. My task, my duty, which there's nobody on the planet better than I am, is to get you from A to B, B being generational wealth, as fast as humanly possible. Now, we all know the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, but it's not a straight line here because of the baggage, and we're going to talk about, and how you get rid of your emotional baggage, which I said last night before I left. You can thank your parents for, or your grandparents, or whoever raised you. And so, some people in the room were raised in an orphanage because they were abandoned. So whoever had that first 7 or 8 years of training you, and self-esteem is built the first 7 or 8 years of life. Now, I'm going to the Vatican in a few days. The Catholic Church has their foot up my ass so far that I'm surprised you don't see the Pope's slippers coming out of my mouth. But they had me the first 7, 8 years. And pre-Vatican Council II, 1965, in the homily, in those days they said Mass in Latin, and they had the back of the priest was to the audience, the parishioners. Now in 65 they turned it around. They switched to the language of the country, and the priests view the parishioners. But back pre-1965, in the homily, which is part of the Mass, it says words to the effect, you give the church, your children, the first 7, 8 years of life, we own them. They don't use the word own. And they own me. I'm a wannabe altar boy, and I'm 78. They did a great job on me. Terrific job. And it's people like me, or my vintage, that still support the church. You go to Mass now, there's nobody there. I'm exaggerating, but nobody. When I went to Mass when I was a kid, if you didn't get there early, you didn't get a seat. The world's changed. But so whoever raised you the first 7 or 8 years of life, you can blame or credit where you are today. Now, it's easier to understand, perhaps, and why your wiring is fucked up. And I don't like to use the blame word or play the blame game, but it's they whoever they are, should take credit for where you are. Comments, before we get to Ravi, comments from you about the backward bike or Barron Trump. Yes, sir. Push the button on the mic, please.
Good morning. A question I have from Ravi. There's a term you used, which is a deaf roll-up. What is this?
Okay, I said we're going to have questions about Barron and the bike, not Ravi. And then the first question out of somebody's mouth is Ravi. And this is why, I'm not making fun of you, I'm just making a comment. This is why I know you're not going to follow the steps. I'm pretty sure everybody in the room brushed their teeth this morning. I'm not positive, but I'd be willing to bet, money. Okay? I'm not willing to bet everybody took a shit this morning, but I want to answer your question. The death roll-up is below the lowest level of assisted living, which is our target market. It should be yours, whether it is or not. It's up to you, is the death roll-up. And the death roll-up is cemeteries, crematoriums, and funeral parlors. And I'm going to say it now. 2 seminars ago, we had a woman named Amber. She sat right back there in that seat. And I make fun, that's not the right terminology. I have a proclivity for blonde hair and big tits. I've always liked blondes and big tits. And if you look at my wife, that's what I've always liked. She was flat-chested. So every time I did the big tits, she would stand up and press forward the tits she doesn't have. Aggressive, 23 years old, a Dutch girl living in America. And she made comments, not once, but several times, that the men in the audience were a disgrace to manhood. We must be you in the audience, must be genetic throwbacks because you're all cunts. She said it a zillion times during the seminar. Well, needless to say, the guys in the seminar didn't think too highly of that. One, because some of them were cunts, and they should squat to pee and wear tampons. But the ones that weren't, we had a Navy SEAL, active duty Navy SEAL there, Johnny, a good kid. Even though he was polite, he obviously didn't think he was a cunt. Well, guess who did the first deal out of that group? Her. In the death roll-up. Because during the seminar, you're going to ask me, in different ways, what's the easiest? Or what's the most sought-after methodology or this path between A and B where I'm not going to embarrass myself, I'm not going to step on my dick, I'm not that. And I will say the lower end of assisted living and the death roll-up. I'll say it 1,000 times, but you're not going to do that. Nobody in that group other than her did the death roll-up. And you're not going to do the death roll-up. So don't even think about it. And she said the manhood, but I mean, you could cut the fucking air with a chainsaw in that group. Every time she got a chance, she stuck her fucking finger in the eye of one of you, that group. Then it came time to box. She boxed. There were no women to box with her. So the best I could, when we put you against one another, I don't believe the guy that boxed with her gave her any quarter. I believe that I probably did the right match. And she held her own. She got knocked down 4 or 5 times. There's no knockdown rule in our boxing. 3 times, we don't have any knock. And she a couple of punches, I thought she was going to be knocked out. Got up. But that's where we are. And she said it clearly. And when on a one-on-one time with her, I said, Amber, you're not making any friends. But you said, I know what I said. But you don't have to go out of your way to be antagonistic, which is also the model for our model, the QLA model. You don't have to go out of your way to be antagonistic. I was. When I was making hundreds of phone calls, as soon as I got the inkling, the answer was no, click. Not thank you, click. Click. Because the thank you takes maybe 2 seconds. 2 seconds times 10,000 calls, that's a lot of time I wasted. Now, any comments about the backward bicycle or Barron? Yes, sir.
Mr. Peña, do you think that Barron will have the level of success as his father or exceed it if he does not get into physical altercations like yourself?
No. No. Now, I don't know if the kid's an alpha male or not, but the good news is 98% of all the high-performance people in the world are betas, like most of you, not alpha. And of the 2% that are alpha males, only about 10% of that 2%, or 0.2%, are aggressive alpha males like I am, like Donald Trump is, and a few others. The good news for you guys, and not just you guys, everybody that's gone through the seminar in 30 years, Bill Gates is an introvert. Zuckerberg is an introvert. Elon Musk is an introvert. Steve Jobs was not an introvert. But most of the Warren Buffett for sure is an introvert. Charlie the Munger is an introvert. One of the things Charlie says in the interview, recent interview with Oprah Winfrey, who is obviously an introvert, he said that we've adapted the last 60 years our management style to our lack of self-esteem. We're not confrontational. They buy assets. They don't even tell the guy. Normally in a public company, they don't go over to see him. You see, you go, if you bought 6% of IBM, you'd go over to see the CEO. Why? Because you'd rather be liked than effective. They've been in American Express and several other investments for decades, and they never met management. Because they manage, and we saw their offices when we went to the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting 2 years ago. And I said, we own shares in Berkshire in our portfolio for our grandchildren. And they have 3,100 square feet that they lease. They've leased for decades in this building. That's a corporate headquarters. So on 3,100 square feet, and they have 27 or 29 employees there. They manage their massive portfolio. But to see, all they do is manage numbers. They don't go and manage the business. And the difference, we, as you'll learn, will have to learn something about the business, because at the end of the day, you're the responsible. Okay, if there's no more questions about that, let's talk about Ravi. 26 exits, 27 acquisitions. You saw his house in the little film before, right? Yeah, okay. When I went, I was in Windsor. My wife and I were in Windsor a few weeks ago, and I couldn't find anybody that knew him. I couldn't find his house, but there's a lot of big estates there, near Windsor Castle. But he's a guy that when he came to the seminar, I made him take the house away from his grandmother that he bought her. I didn't make him do it. He did it when I told him he should. Take the house that he bought for his parents away from his parents. Take the cars that he bought his grandparents and his parents. You have no idea. It was like I cut his liver out. The only one that didn't call him a scumbag was his grandmother. She said, I understand, Ravi. I told you I didn't want it when you bought me my car. Not many of you in this room could do that. But he did it for all the wrong reasons. The same reasons you do it. Because he wanted to be liked. He wanted to be loved. And in Asian families, the kids are their pension plan. They raise you up so you can support them when they get old. Any comments about Ravi? Okay, you go ahead.
In regards to having taken everything back from his family, was it purely for the emotion?
He was going broke. He should have fucking never bought him. He was a moron. He was a cunt.
There was one more question. It was, in the film, he talked about putting businesses back to administration.
That means bankruptcy. He wanted to make it sound better. Donald Trump has taken 27 companies into bankruptcy when he ran for president. And the newscasters and the talking heads made a big deal about it. To the morons, voters, bankruptcy still has a negative stigma. In business, it's not a negative stigma, it's a business tool. I've only taken one company in my 53 years of business into reorganization, never liquidation, 25 or 30 years ago, and I took it out of reorganization. But most of the words, I'm going to show you a slide in a little bit, here in Scotland. 9% of the people in Scotland believe the SNP that runs Scotland, Scottish National Party, understand business. 9%. 91% think 91% think they don't know dick about anything, yet they've ruled here for 16 years. Anything else about Ravi? Okay, YouTube.